I had some issues with my Zoom client, so apologize for being late.
Yeah,
It's
no
nice
worries.
to see you all again. It's not like in person, but it's different.
Yeah,
It's a
definitely.
bit different after having been in person, though.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Definitely.
Shall we start?
Yeah.
Yeah, give me 1 second because I had all the issues open before having to restart. So yeah, let me very quickly access today's agenda. I'm going to share my screen. And as every day, I'm going to start with the meeting etiquette. A quick reminder that we will love to record this session to share it with the community, but also in YouTube. If someone is against sharing this in YouTube, just reach out to me privately and I'll take care of not uploading this one. If not, I'll upload it tomorrow. We encourage everyone to challenge any language or behavior that is harmful or not inclusive or against our code of conduct. We will try to stay on mute when someone is speaking and use the reactions to ask for a turn to speak. And with any further ado, let me make this bigger and let's see what we have in the agenda for today. Okay, for today, couple of reminders. One pull request sent by Greg that is waiting for review. So I just adding here as a reminder to everyone to take a look when you have time. And an ADR that is also looking for reviewers. Finally, I added another item for sharing with you all an idea about running a small mentoring program because all the Google Summer of Code contributors that are still around are interested in mentoring, but let's discuss that later. So, any questions so far before reviewing the action items from the last call? No? Cool. Let's open the previous session. In this session was like a brief agenda just with Ben, Fran, Sil de la Mora, and myself, with one single item that was discussing myself sharing an update about the Google Summer of Code, the status, the timelines, etc. The only action item captured was for me, and it was reaching out to all the participants privately in separate messages to encourage them to stay in the community and keep contributing or start contributing to any of the projects that we have. And I did it, and I had like a good response by at least 5 people. And this is why in one of the items of the agenda, I like to share with you an idea to see how we can incentivize them to keep contributing, but also provide kind of mentoring. Not the same level of mentoring that the Google Summer of Code, but at least something that can help them to develop their careers. Any comments so far regarding the last session? Okay, let's go then with today's agenda. As I said, reminders. First one, there is a pull request in the spec repository that is the 1400 that is looking for reviews. This one was created by Greg, if I'm not mistaken, and related the. So go ahead, Greg.
So this one is actually, this was created by me, but it was at the request of Henry offline over in the API spec the open API Slack. It was work that he had done prior to his leave of absence. And he requested that I just go ahead and create the pull request to bring in some of the changes. Really, all it's doing is fixing the ABNF syntax so that it aligns with what the text is saying. And then there's another comment on there that I can't push to Henry's branch. So I'll have to create a follow-up PR for that. But this is just correcting the spec. Henry said that he would be happy to push this out to IETF to publish it. I conferred with Ben to find out if he had a problem with me running this, and he did not. So yeah, the PR is still out there. It just needs a review, and then I can merge it and then do the second PR, and then I'll let Henry know, and he can do the publishing stuff.
Thanks, Greg. So if you guys have time along the week, please do take a look. By the way, quick question. Does somebody know when Jason is back from his trip? Is he returning this week or the week after?
It's a week after, so he's not back this week, but he's back on the 29th.
Okay.
As far as my calendar says.
Great. I was thinking in this review, but also in the World Summer of Code, because we had to kickstart the discussion, the community bonding stage, and he's not here like as the main mentor. So probably I will set up a call this week to have a session with Fran and the other mentors, not for kickstarting everything in full, but at least making sure that Fran is excited, not thinking that we forgot about her. Okay, cool. So please, as I said, do take a look to this pull request when you have time, because as Greg said, he's waiting for another pull request. So yeah, that will help probably. Second item in the agenda, ADR waiting for review too, and again from Greg. So Greg, if you will like to say something about this one, but my intent in putting this here is just remind everyone to take a look when they have time to make a quick review and merge as soon as possible.
Yeah, this one was, I wrote this up at the end of last week, and it's still, I don't know if we, for ADRs, I don't know if we want to follow the minimum open time policy, or if we want to merge that early. I don't really care. But this one is in regard to a discussion that Jason and I were having regarding, it started with a discussion of whether or not we should have unevaluated properties false in the meta schema. And Jason had some good points of why it shouldn't be, and I had some good points of why it should be. And we eventually just landed on we can publish both. And some of the things that led to being able to publish both is that we've decided that a dialect is going to be kind of duct typed, in that it's defined by the dialect that a meta schema describes is defined by the set of vocabularies that are present in the meta schema. And then that allows you to actually have multiple meta schemas for a dialect. And then since we have that, then we can have a strict meta schema, or rather a closed meta schema and an open meta schema that serves that covers all the bases for what Jason wanted and what I wanted. And then people can just use whichever one they want. I think for the purposes of alignment with implementations, the closed meta schema is going to be is going to be more useful. However, for Jason's purpose, he wanted to be sure that an old copy of the meta schema doesn't incorrectly invalidate a newer schema, a schema that contains newer keywords, which an old meta schema, a closed old meta schema would, because it would not be able to recognize those keywords. So this is basically just saying, here's what we think a dialect, here's what we're going to say that a dialect is and how it's defined. And we're going to be publishing both open and closed meta schemas for the specification. I don't know that I'm going to do a blog post on this, but I wanted to get the decision down.
I think I still had some reservations on this, but I haven't made the time to fully explore them and write them down. Can you remember specifically why Jason wanted old meta schemas to invalidate future potential schemas, or didn't want? I mean, I think that's what you said, wasn't it?
So if you go look at the discussion, his case was that he didn't want it to provide a false negative. So basically saying he thought that a false negative was worse than a false positive. And I don't know that I particularly agree with that, but I think Jason's looking at it more from a theoretical point of view, whereas I've been looking at this more from a practical point of view. Jason, I don't think that Jason's wrong. Yeah, with a stable specification and a stable meta schema, ideally you should be able to take any meta schema and validate any schema with it, even if the meta schema is an older copy.
You see, I think that's
Theory.
the point. I think that's the point where I disagree, because I think you want a meta schema to be able to validate if the schema is correct for a given release or version of JSON schema.
Right, but we're not having versions anymore, is the thing.
Except we kind of are, because we're doing the snapshots, which is what people are going to use for the IDs, right?
No, the IDs are staying the same. We're having a single meta schema URI. Well, two, one for open, one for closed.
Yeah, I think
But
that was
if we were just considering the open one, which is Jason's, it would be a single meta schema URI that is perpetually updated, or the meta schema itself is perpetually updated. However, my argument against that was that the meta schema, if it's going to be packaged in an implementation, is going to go stale eventually, because you can't update the meta schema in a package. So I don't think that he does that in his implementation, and so his perspective is more of go fetch the current meta schema and validate the schema that's being being used against the current meta schema. Either fetch it or have it provided or whatever. And not all implementations do that. I package the meta schemas, and I expect a lot of others do as well.
And there's the offline use case where you don't want that to be able to connect to the internet anyway, like in CI/CD stuff.
Right.
For that.
In which case, the user would have to have a copy of the meta schema, which eventually would go stale.
Yeah.
So
I
think you and I are in alignment, Ben. The other use case for having an open meta schema was extension. And we had this discussion a little bit, excuse me. We had this discussion a little bit in Slack, where Ben, I think you were saying that the meta schemas weren't intended to be extended, but I don't see why it can't be. That's the process that I've used for my data and unique keys vocabularies. I've created meta schemas for those that just reference back to the main JSON schema meta schema, and then kind of build on top of that. But if we add unevaluated properties false in there, then that won't work for me.
Yeah,
and I have to build a new meta schema from scratch, which I prefer not to do.
Yeah, I've come around to that argument definitely, and I think there is value in providing both an open and closed version of the meta schema. However, I have a big issue with having a single URI and not having the snapshotted date or URI available as well. And I can't quite remember if that's been discussed. I think there is value in providing like the current one, but we've done that before and we ran into loads of problems and we explicitly stopped doing that. And we provided, only the versioned ones. So yeah, I think I know we want to have this perpetually evolving spec, but I think the snapshots also have a huge value. And we need to be releasing the snapshotted versions of the meta schema with the IDs, because otherwise you have multiple schemas. You might have one from like 2023 and 2025 and 2027, and they've all got the same ID, and you can't use more than one of them because they have the same ID. And I know the argument is you
wouldn't want to use more than one of them though.
Well, you might want to within the same implementation.
I don't think that you will.
Well,
not within the same implementation.
What if you want to validate that you're going to be somebody's going to be able to use the schema you've created in an implementation that only supports 2023?
You would have to run it through that implementation.
Okay, how do you make sure it's compliant with all implementations which have compliance with 2023? If you're saying I generate schemas that work in implementations that are fully compliant with 2023.
I don't know. I'll have to think on that.
But that's kind of my, like, if we're releasing the snapshotted versions with the fully dated IDs as well, I'm fine with that. Because I think that's absolutely essential, because otherwise you're having schemas which are evolving over time but don't have any unique identifier, and that's a huge problem for me. I can see many issues with that.
The problem I see with doing that though is, like, say I've got my implementation updated to 2025 and someone wants to come along and say, hey, do you support schemas that are up to 2023? And they give me this meta schema that has an ID of 2023. I don't recognize it. Or they give me a meta schema ID. They give me a schema that has a meta schema ID with a 2023 date in it, and I don't recognize that ID because I haven't packaged that in my library. I'm only packaging the latest that I support. So I don't think the question is, does this implementation support up to 2023? I think the question is, does this implementation support this schema? And if I'm on 2025 and I get a schema that is 2023, the ID for that, or the schema, the dollar schema value for that needs to just the unchanging meta schema URI, not a dated schema URI. We're trying to get away from having dated stuff. We're trying to have one meta schema saying this schema can be validated by the stable meta schema. And if you give me a schema that only has 2023 features, then I can use the 2025 meta schema to validate it, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I would just expect your implementation to do some date maths and go, yeah, that's before the one that I know about. I mean, if that's the case, if we never want to have IDs, unique IDs in the meta schemas, then why did we decide to have snapshots at all? Because that was kind of my whole reason for saying we should have snapshots, to have dated meta schemas.
I don't think that we need to have snapshots of the meta schemas. I think it's fine to have snapshots of the specifications so that we can identify, or at least have some kind of indicator of when features go in, of when features were adopted into the specification. But I don't think that we need snapshots of, I don't think we as JSON Schema need to maintain those snapshots. Snapshots will inevitably exist because people like me are packaging the meta schema into the libraries. But I don't think that's something that we as JSON Schema need to handle.
It certainly makes somebody picking a library a lot more of a challenge. Like someone has, say, a 2024 JSON schema. That's not going to work in implementations that only support up to 2023. How are they going to know that if there are no identifiers either in their schema and the implementation doesn't use any sort of identifier as to what it supports? Are people expected to try it and see that it fails?
I think we're expecting the user to know what features are in the schema. And unless they're handed the schema, if it's something that they've authored, I would expect them to understand what features are in the schema.
Most of the time it's going to be inherited or provided by other people. I mean, that's one of the big things for JSON schema is used by others, right? I would bet that the majority of schemas that are used are not used or are used by people who are not the author.
Okay.
It's actually much worse than that, at least as far as I've heard it discussed, because at least the discussions that I've heard, there's no such thing as 2024 even. There's fine, maybe we're publishing snapshots, but that's not what's going to happen. Instead, implementations will implement if 2023 is features A, B, and C, and 2024 is D and E, and 2025 is F and G, implementations will support features A, D, and F, whereby they support nothing in full from 2023, 24, and 25, but you still need to know which of the sub-features the schema uses that are supported by the implementation. So I think the situation is even worse than you're making it.
Yeah, I think that was one of Jason's arguments as well.
Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, that it's an argument against this whole thing, I think. I don't know what it means for it to be one of Jason's arguments. Like, it's just, I'm not saying we're on the completely wrong path, but removing $ schema because you want to have one single stable URI actually sounds okay to me, but you have to replace it with something that is actually at the feature level. So you have to replace it with something that says this schema uses these 10 things, and then implementations can validate against the 10 things that the schema says it uses.
Right. I don't think that we're not arguing that we're removing schema as a keyword.
But effectively you are, because if there's only one stable URI that ever goes there, you're basically removing it because it's practically not there. And Jason says, yeah, that's fine. The only purpose is for it to be used by other dialects other than us. But no one does that. And OpenAI tooling is not going to start using it for that. Like that, effectively, you're removing the keyword by making it always have exactly one value.
And that like we see people writing schemas with that, and they're always met with surprises when the implementation doesn't support the specific version that they've assumed it does. And I want to like move away from that and encourage people to always use $schema with a dated ID. So I'm very strongly opposed to not having a dated ID as part of the snapshots. I mean, I mean that was the primary reason that I suggested having snapshots.
I don't know what I think overall, but I still don't understand the meta discussion. Like, I don't understand why we're having this discussion now. We like mixing discussions about the thing that we're trying to decide on with like other completely unrelated discussions. Like this entire discussion, in my opinion, has something to do with our new release process and how we want to evolve the spec, and nothing at all to do with unevaluated properties in the schema and the fact that today that's a correct, like today, in today's version of releasing the spec, it's perfectly fine to have two versions of the meta schema, one that has unevaluated properties and one that has unevaluated properties false. There's nothing wrong with that the way we publish the spec today. It's just we're choosing to have this completely unrelated discussion about the entirety of the new way we want to release the spec under the guise that we're talking about unevaluated properties false. It just has nothing to do with anything. It's also really bad for transparency because users don't see that that's what we're talking about. I don't understand the meta discussion at all. Like, this is just completely...
So I started with unevaluated false, and Jason thought that it was a bad idea to have a closed meta schema, and we moved, and he tried to find what the actual root of the disagreement was, and we kind of got down into the weeds of what, you know, how are we planning on evolving the specification in meta schemas. So I think we're trying to dig down into what the root of the disagreement is. And the idea is that it will inform the original question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to me, all that means is that an ADR, if you were to write down what was decided should have nothing in particular to do with unevaluated properties. Like, if we've decided anything, it must be a fully fledged out way that we're going to evolve the spec, and that's what people are reflecting on. Because that's what it sounds like the discussion must have concluded by. Like, all these things that Ben are surprised. I didn't read your ADR yet, so maybe you did cover this, but like, I still think whatever was decided must have been a much larger decision, maybe it's a sensical decision and I just need to understand the reasoning, but it can't have anything in particular to do with unevaluated properties, even if that's how the discussion started. Because you must have decided things like $ schema only has one URI and will never change, which Ben is surprised by. But that must be predicated on some sort of reasoning for how we're going to allow schemas to communicate what features they use. And that must be predicated on what is $schema for? Is it for the meta schema or is it for the dialect? And like, there's like 6 very large decision points that must be involved in somehow concluding some of these things. And I just don't see, to me, and I know it's not you. I had this discussion with Jason, and he was like, yeah, I think these are the same. Let's just talk about them at the same time. But then the decision, but then the decision should reflect that, I think. Then the decision should reflect that we just made some very big decisions about how we're publishing the spec and how new schemas are going to be written.
I think that's part of the excuse me, part of the problem is we didn't actually make the decision on how we're going to publish new versions of the spec. Like, we didn't actually finalize that development process. There was a lot of discussion, but we didn't actually finalize it and write an ADR about it.
Yeah, I think we're trying to work our way back to it. I don't think we're ready to resume SDLC just yet. I think we're kind of working back to it.
You know, the point Julian's making here is we're trying to solve problems or solve particular discussions based on the assumption that something particular in the SDLC is going to go one way, when that, like, we haven't decided that we're not going to have the meta schema as part of the snapshot process. Like, that's not a decision that I think we've made as far as I can tell. And it's a different discussion to the one, although it's been used as an argument for the meta schema discussion. I think it's a completely separate thing.
Okay.
But yeah, so yes, thank you for rephrasing. That is part of what I was trying to say. And also, in short, I just want to make sure I understand which is the thing we said we decided and how small is it. Because if it's a small thing, if it's literally just we decided we're publishing both unevaluated properties false and non-unevaluated false meta schemas, I'm like, cool, that sounds great. Let's do it. I don't need to read anything else in your document. But if it's like, we decided this, and then as part of that, the reasoning for this is because we're going to do this, this, and this, and now we're considering those things decided, then I need to read what you wrote very carefully and make sure I agree with your stuff. Because I don't think, as I say, I think, for example, if you're saying dollar schema, if you're saying this is predicated on us jointly agreeing that from now on meta schemas need to forward and backwards validate all schemas, and that means dollar schema always has the same value except if you're not using an official JSON schema dialect, and that means that we may or may not publish meta schemas for each of the individual years. All those are giant decisions, and I probably don't agree with each of the individual ones, even if I agree with we're publishing both meta schemas.
Okay.
I definitely don't. I still don't. This also, like, I don't know what to argue with in this post, because Jason's definition of compatible doesn't make any sense. I don't think. Like, no user thinks this is what compatible means. Like, he wrote schemas can be valid, or outcomes can be true or false at one point and then indeterminate at a later point. No one thinks, I don't think I've ever met someone who would consider that to be compatible. But I don't see what it has anything to do with this decision. It's just completely irrelevant. So it's hard to focus on, or it's hard to get to the end and say we all agree and I agree we're doing X, because of the other stuff that I want to explicitly say I'm not agreeing to that. And are we relying on those other things or not?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you were linking to anything in particular in this link. If you are, I'll read it more carefully.
I sent you, I added to the chat the comment where it sounds to me like we come to an agreement. And that includes the things that I mentioned in the ADR, which are the duck-tut dialect and a single meta schema URI, or at least one for open, one for closed. And the URI stays the same, but the content changes. So those are the things that I think that we agreed on, and that's what I included in the ADR. And that those three things then inform having an open and closed version.
Okay, that is helpful, by the way. I'm reflecting now on what you said. So these are the three things that you're claiming agreement, at least from you and Jason, on. I mean, I shouldn't do this on this call, but I will anyways. I don't understand the first one already, the duck type thing, because as far as I remember, the spec still says the spec still allows for adding additional keywords outside of a vocabulary, right?
The 2012 does, yeah.
And that language is still in the existing spec, right?
Yes.
So what does it mean that two dialects are the same if the vocabs match? That's not true, because one dialect can have extra keywords in it that are outside of vocab and the other one cannot.
Well, this is moving forward. This is
right,
not,
but that's backwards.
This is not reevaluating 2012.
Forget about 2012. But that's backwards, though. You need to first. You'll forgive me. I'm being argumentative just for the sake of it. You need to first remove the language from the spec to sort of prepare that decision before you. No, like the spec says something that contradicts.
We're trying to figure out what needs to be changed in the spec before we do it.
Right, but the thing that you're contradicting in the spec is not the thing that you're directly deciding on. So you're making a decision that implies behavior for some other part of the spec, and you're calling that decision done, but the other thing wasn't on its own discussed, right? So forget about duck typing and forget about stable spec for a minute. Let's assume I actually don't feel this way, but I'm going to devil's advocate. Assume someone is really for being able to have keywords that are outside of vocabularies. By you publishing the ADR, you're explicitly publishing something that relies on removing that functionality without notifying the people who care about that functionality and being able to advocate for it staying. No? You're basically making a decision that has knock-on effects for something else in the spec that's still there. If someone goes and reads it today, they'll see that functionality. So you can't decide something that's against something that's in there. You have to first remove the thing that you want to contradict by saying, we're explicitly deciding we want to get rid of the ability to have keywords that are outside vocabulary. Then everyone will get up and say, no, I don't like that idea. I like this functionality. And then
but we've done that.
We did?
Well, we haven't made the changes to the spec. But we've already done that by saying that unknown keywords are not permitted.
Yeah, we did actually do that.
So we've already made the declaration that vocabularies, or that any keyword must be declared in a vocabulary.
Right. Okay. So us saying that unknown keyword, right. Sorry. This always confuses me because to me, those aren't unknown keywords, but okay. Our intention in the spec is to call those unknown keywords. Okay, fine. Yeah, I retract what I just said, even though, yeah, I disagree. I think that's silly, but okay, at least it's consistent.
So
all right.
I would say that an unknown, maybe we just need to define this in the spec, but I would say that an unknown keyword is any keyword that's that is not automatically interoperable between implementations. So if a schema says foo and foo is supported in one implementation, then that's not a known keyword according to the JSON schema spec, because it's not supported in other implementations. It would have to be in a vocabulary, and then that vocabulary would need to be supported by by any implementations. But that's a nuance.
Yeah. Okay. Forget about that. I didn't mean to bring that discussion back in, but okay. I'll read the three of these at least as the three things you're claiming we're deciding.
Okay. When did we say Jason's getting back? Because I think if we can, I don't know, that there is a distinct, Julian, you brought this up, there is a distinct difference in opinion on what compatibility is. For instance, you said moving from a known outcome to an indeterminate outcome, you would not consider compatible. And I think I agree.
I think I also agree. I mean, the last comment I left on this is I wanted to generate some like pros examples that explains why that wouldn't be a good user experience.
Yeah. I think I've done that as well in the various places in this discussion. I've made over multiple discussions, I've made many arguments as to why, like logical type arguments as to why having an open meta schema is not a good thing. But then Jason argues that it's not forward compatible. It's not future compatible because he's arguing that an older meta schema should be able to validate a schema with newer features.
I see that's a statement I completely disagree with.
Me too.
I think
but
the
it's
compatibility
not fair to Jason for us to gang up on him while he's not here.
I agree. We yes, totally. As I said, you know, I intended to write up some pros and I haven't done that because there's other things that have to come first. So yeah, it's a tricky situation. I think we've spent quite a lot of time on this, and I'd like to sort of draw a line under it on this call for now. I think what's helpful is if we try and spend a good chunk of this week reviewing this particular PR and the discussions and issues around it, just trying to get ahead on what we think it's saying and what we think the discussion is saying, and weighing in some opinions on anything that doesn't quite sit right. Does that sound reasonable approach?
Well, from this discussion, I'm happy to close this PR because it doesn't sound like this ADR is going to be going forward in its current state. Probably we'll have another ADR at some point, but it sounds like I need you two to join in on the conversation that Jason and I have been having.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about that, Greg. I know how frustrating that is when you've put effort into an ADR
fine.
and you got to close it down. So
it's fine.
What I can say is that it was a positive investment because we had this discussion. So you write it down. We had this long and great discussion, and now we are in a better spot to continue the discussion. So yeah, thank you, Greg.
Yep.
Okay, so we still have some minutes. Let's go back to the agenda. Let me share my screen again. Okay, last item is again from myself. As I said in the beginning of the session when I was introducing the agenda, in the previous weekly meeting, we agreed in reaching out to everyone that participated in Google Assembly of Code to thank them again and congratulate them for the great work, and also to encourage them to stay in the community and keep contributing to projects. That those interactions went great, so people is interested in keep contributing, and also I offered them some mentoring, not like the same level. I mean, I didn't go in detail in my mail, but I said, if you want to stay in the community, we can offer some mentoring, basically. Okay. Having said that, instead of just speaking with everyone and keep enable them to keep contributing, I'm thinking in doing something a little bit more formal. I found this program, just Googling, with a very simple and lightweight approach to put together a kind of minimum viable mentoring program, let's say, with a little bit more structure, with putting with writing down some expectations about what time we can provide, the length, I mean, a kind of a structure that can help me instead of just creating everything from scratch, just inspired on this. In the end, is just having them keep contributing to projects and provide kind of one-to-ones that I will do mostly, not Julian. Julian, because I'm saying Julian because the projects are basically the test suite and Boti. So if these people is going to keep contributing, is going to be just regular pull request reviews, but also I will try to have one-to-one, be weekly or something like that with them, and trying to set some goals about how we can help them in their careers, and just advise them. I don't know if that makes sense. There is one template here. Just give me 1 second. One template for these interactions. Basically, is a document with setting up what are the expectations of the mentoring and keeping track of every single conversation, but with a better structure instead of like not doing something ad hoc with everyone. Just try to follow this template instead of weekly. Probably we be weekly or something like that, and put a fixed length like 3 or 6 months. And I will basically help them with career development. And if they need some coding support, maybe I will try to reach out to someone in the community or in the collaborators team to help me with that. But basically, it's just get some feedback to saying, hey, Ben, you are not crazy. If you want to do this, just go ahead and see. Let's see how it goes. Instead of just go and do it and just doing a small check here to if there is one kind of red flag or something from your side. Yeah, that's it. I like to try this as a small mentoring thing. Thoughts?
So is that something that we're doing separately from GSOC? Or did they approach us and recommend this?
It's separately because I mean, the reason is we have like a people that is looking for mentoring and is here. And if we can offer them a small flavor of mentoring, probably we can retain some of them to stay in our community and also keep contributing to the test suite of OT. But it's separated and I think it's compatible. I saw other projects participating in Google Summer of Code and having their own mentoring program. For example, Async API is doing it. It's just putting some small structure for contributors that are new in open source or new in the industry. The good thing is not going to be a good investment. It's just put together the README for this and having bi-weekly one-to-ones with 3 or 4 people, probably not more.
I guess my concern, I mean, it's a good idea and it's good to be building people up and mentoring people, but my concern is
I can hear you, Ben. I don't know
sorry.
about others.
I think it's a good thing to be doing, but my concern is the amount of time it would take up. Like looking at the community and advocacy plan in terms of the priorities, improving the contributors strategy is on there, but it doesn't come up as high or very high. It comes up as medium, and there's quite a lot of other things that are going to require substantial time and effort. And I don't feel we're there to be offering a mentorship strategy right now. I think it's a good opportunity time-wise, and I think we'll have that opportunity again in the future and future versions of Google Summer of Code and Google Summer of Docs. but my concern is that now's not the right time to be doing this in terms of the time effort.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, we need to get moving on actually writing the spec again, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think this is not as it's more like a tactical movement in terms of timing, as you said, Ben. It's not like putting together a contributors strategy. In reality, it's just, I mean, I reach out to them as I think that I'm supposed to do as a community manager. Instead of just creating this, if we don't do this way, probably it's just I'm going to have the one-to-ones with them, but without putting this page. It's just do the same thing, but with the minimal structure.
Yeah, I mean,
because I mean, I already implicitly committed to support them in some way, but the reality is I can't help it with the coding thing. If they expect from my side like something that I can't provide, I will be clear in the first one-to-one, so I can help them like to see a part of make for them the experience successful in our community, maybe help them in other things related to their career, like some advice if they have to prepare an interview or something, or I can help them with the CV, stuff like that. The LinkedIn profile, I can help them to tune it. Small things that are not purely related to a standard mentoring, but at least is we are a community, and we will do our side for you to progress in your career the time that you are helping us with some issues here and there.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, yeah, I do see your point that it is part of your sort of standard work already, and what I think you're saying is doing this will save you time, really. So although it's not on our list of priorities, it's still work that you're going to be doing anyway. So I'm wondering if maybe we could, like, could we call it something else and not a mentorship program?
Yes.
Leaving space for a mentorship program. I know that's just semantics.
Or just don't make lots of noise about it, because you can't put the cat back in the bag if you go widely announce that we have a mentorship program. Yeah.
Thank you everyone for the feedback. I do like that not noisy approach. So I just reached out for 5 people and I will keep the discussion with them, like silently. And probably from the 5 that replied in the first week or the first month, just 2 will stay. But at least I provided them what I like, put it on the table. And also it can be like a first experience in a totally controlled environment to see how it goes. And if we decide to do something in the future, when we have like a better timing and resources and so on, we know much better what to expect. So yeah, if that is okay for everyone, I will just continue the discussion with these 4 people silently, and I will update from time to time. Probably if that works, Julian, you will see some PRs flowing in Boti and in the test suite.
Yeah, there already are. I'm assuming probably some of the same people that you're talking to. So there's at least 2 people who are sending pull request. 2 additional people besides the person who was selected who's sending pull requests. So yeah, I probably am already seeing them, which is good. Yeah, I mean, happy to see them stick around, but yeah.
Let's see. I'm going to put like a fixed time, like 3 or 6 months. I'll check with them what they prefer. And after the time is done, let's see what is first, how to measure if this is a successful experience. I will ask them for a qualitative survey, let's say, what is their feeling about how it was. And also we can take a look at some metrics in the repos to see how much these people contributed, and putting both things together, like the Boti on the test suites had better contributions than before. Perfect. Julian needed to spend more time reviewing that expected. Let's see what they decide. Plus, these people turned in more active members in the community, and the feedback was positive. Let's make a next step. So if I mean the metrics doesn't look good, yeah, probably we should hold and stick with the Google Summer of Code theme if we still think that this is our approach. Yeah, I like it. I'll put everything together in the notes of the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Any other comment related to this one? I'm going to stop sharing, but as I said, thank you, everyone. Super helpful, your feedback.
Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah, we are done with the agenda right on time, just 60 minutes. Any other comment before closing the session?
The only other thing I thought was probably worth mentioning is I attended a call earlier today run by the OpenJS Foundation on the Sovereign Tech Fund grant that they've been issued. I think we all know about that, but there's some articles and stuff if you'd like to know more. I'm not sure how it entirely applies to us. There may be some opportunity to get some DevOps work done. So keep that in mind if you have any GitHub automations that you would like us to build that we don't currently have. But I think that the main focus of this grant is on the security aspect. So if we can think on that just as an ongoing thing, and I'll update as I know more, but it's very early days at this point in time.
Thank you, Ben. I just put the link of the announcement of this huge, in the conference, they said that is the biggest investment provided by a government to the Linux Foundation.
Yeah, it's 900,000, but I forget what currency. It might have been dollars, it might have been euros. I can't remember.
Yeah. Okay, so so if we think that there are some automation stuff that we can include, how we are supposed to put that together? Like, let's see how the discussion goes naturally, and
Yeah,
reach out to them.
I don't know at this point. We're just
okay.
Yeah, wait and see what happens.
Perfect. Thank you,
Okay.
everyone. Thank
Thank
you. And have a good rest of the day, and see you in Slack. And as I said at the beginning, it was great to see your faces again and the feeling that is different. So take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.